Good evening and welcome to Embracing Diversity, a bi-weekly online dialogue. Tonight's topic is Crossing the Line, Part 2, Racial Harassment and Discrimination. Our host and facilitator is Reverend Vicki L. Hughes, and she will moderate tonight's discussion.
Good evening, everybody. Again, I'm Reverend Vicki Hughes, and I want to welcome you to Embracing Diversity. Now, we are a group of people who actually dialogue and educate on diversity, equity, and inclusion. We are hoping to, each time we dialogue on bi-weekly Wednesdays, we are hoping to really serve as a model of everyday people dialoguing about current issues, important topics related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. We are modeling what I would call a love thy neighbor ministry. We began in June of 2020. So we have been on Facebook Live numerous times. Each time a different group of panelists comes on, and each time we have a different topic. Tonight is an actual part 2. 2 weeks ago, we talked about sexual harassment in the workplace. And tonight, the topic is Crossing the Line, Racial Harassment and Discrimination. And before I get started with a brief introduction and then turn it over to my panelists, I want to ask everyone, panelists as well as viewers, if you would please share this video on your Facebook pages. We want this dialogue to reach as many people as possible. So again, share and like the video. And also, if you wouldn't mind, please feel like you can engage with us, share comments in the comment section. And also you can ask questions if you would. Please include the person's name who you would like to address the question to. That would be great. Or if it's for everybody, that's fine. So again, welcome to Embracing Diversity. I want to first define the two terms we're talking about tonight. We might have some middle schoolers or high schoolers or college age students on here, as well as middle-aged and older senior citizens, older adults. So I just want to define these two terms. They're somewhat basic, but I still want to define them. Racial harassment is physical or mental harassment against someone or a group of people on the basis of their race. And then racial discrimination is defined as any discrimination against any individual on the basis of their skin color or racial or ethnic origin. Individuals can discriminate by refusing to do business with, socialize with, or share resources with people of a certain group. So those are the two definitions. Let me briefly mention things that have happened in recent years, and then I'm going to turn it over to my panelists. In June 2015, white supremacist Dylan Roof appeared at an evening Bible study at Emmanuel AME Church in Charleston, South Carolina. That, for people who don't know, is considered to be a Black church. It's a Methodist church. Towards the end of the Bible study, the lesson and the prayer, the ending prayer, Dylan Roof opened fire, killing 9 individuals, including the pastor, who was also an activist. He was involved in government. I believe he was a senator, and he was just very well known in the community and well liked. But again, a total of 9 people were killed. Dylan Roof was a known white supremacist. In 2017, Preston Bell was one of 3 Native Americans killed by police in Montana that year. Preston was a victim of police brutality at age 24, the year he was murdered, and he was actually shot at 74 times. Another statistic here, of 51 hate-motivated murders reported in 2019, 22, almost half, were from Walmart's anti-Hispanic mass shooting in El Paso, Texas. The suspect, alleged shooter's name is Patrick Crusius. This happened in August 2019. This gunman had posted online, his disdain for Mexican immigrants in the US, and he felt like there was an invasion of these immigrants. Most victims of that massacre were Latinos. The gunman drove 11 hours, hundreds of miles to get to El Paso, Texas to carry out this act. And last Tuesday night, March 16th, 2021, 8 people were killed in the Atlanta area when Robert Long shot them. 6 of these individuals were Asian American women. This man had traveled to 3 different spas in the Atlanta area to bring about these actions to commit these crimes. Was that a hate crime? Many believe that it was. What's scary is that we don't know who or which group will be targeted next. People are being caught off guard. And I, posed this question: how did we get to this place where we are tested, targeted, many of us, depending on our ethnicity? Where, does this mean that the strongest people will survive and others won't? Is this survival of the fittest? The dominant race gets to decide who lives or dies, who's worthy, as if, they are playing God. It's become pretty disturbing. So before I turn it to my panelists, I just want to say that singer Sam Cooke sang a song years ago, "A change is going to come." Race relations seem to be worse, getting worse and worse. So my question is, when is change, positive change coming? Panelists, let's talk. Let me start with, let me see if I was trying to get one Asian panelist on here. Let's see if she's joined us. If not, it doesn't look like she's on. So if anybody, whoever wants to start, let me get people's reactions to the shooting from last Tuesday with the Asian Americans. What do you feel is the cause of those shootings, and just what are your reactions? Anybody can start.
I think it's horrible that we stand here in 2021 and we still have found that the things that divide us are things that have been utilized to incite violence against those of us who are different. The way that we've utilized race in this country for more than 400 years to divide us, to determine who has access to wealth, power, and privilege, and to determine who therefore must suffer without it, is acknowledged. We know the history of this. But the fact that we at 2021 still have not seen past that fallacious way of thinking, haven't seen past what Ashley Montagu called humanity's most dangerous myth, haven't seen a different way of relating to each other. The fact that we are just coming out of an administration where we had someone sitting in the White House who would fuel the flames of hatred by utilizing such phrases as the Asian flu and trying to utilize China, to denigrate China by affiliating it with the pandemic that's striking our nation. I think all of these things have contributed to where we are. And until we finally wake up and recognize that every human being is a child of God, made in God's image, and therefore deserves to be respected as such, as Dr. King said, we'll continue to see these kinds of things. We need to wake up. We need to change the way that we relate to each other if we're to ever hope to have a different way of getting along as Americans.
Thank you for your points, Dr. Sadler. Could I hear from Reverend Yolanda Alston Foster? What do you think about what happened last Tuesday night?
I was just getting ready to respond to Dr. Sadler's comments. First of all, I do agree that we have to have dialogue. If we're going to get anywhere, we have to talk to one another. Having sides and this partisanship and one side not listening to the other, everyone putting up walls and borders. against each other is not going to solve anything. So having dialogue is the first thing. And as far as what happened in the Atlanta area, I really felt a connection to it because I not only felt as though it was Asian Americans that were targeted, but women. And so as a African American / Jamaican American, yes, my father's people were immigrants. And I'm a proud immigrant individual from an immigrant family, and I'm proud of it. And a woman, I really feel as though it really hit home. So that could be any of us. That could be any of us as far as just going about our daily duties. They were doing a job. So I think about myself as going to work, just doing my job, and someone having some type of bias against me from the way I look and not even know me. And I don't even make it home. So this has to stop.
It absolutely does. Let me call on Courtney. You know, the suspect, alleged shooter from last Tuesday night, Robert Long, says that, and actually one of his friends also said that supposedly there is some kind of sexual addiction. This is his excuse as to what he did. What are your thoughts on that?
So I think it's a convenient excuse. I think that we all know our history, at least everybody here, I believe, knows our history and the racism that has been woven in our history. And I think maybe, I could see where maybe he's going to say this is a gender thing, but ultimately it's not. The crime was against an Asian community and Asian women specifically. And this is a pattern that we've seen with white men, majority, right? We know at least 55% of mass shootings are committed by white men. It is a problem we have in our country with white misogyny and white violence. And we've got to name that. We have to say that. We have to say it's not okay, and it is fueled even more by leadership. One of my very good friends here is Korean American, and she has experienced a huge increase of violence directed towards her personally that she's relayed to me just over the last 6 months. So if you're seeing that on a personal level in everyday interactions, how can we not say that this was fueled by that hatred from the top, right? There's a fear that drives it, and that fear leads to hate when we don't talk to our friends and our neighbors and love them as our friends and our neighbors.
Yes. Mary Frances, Courtney just stated that something we all know, that most of these crimes are committed by white males in the country against different ethnic groups. So, how do you feel you're as a senior citizen? I mean, you've lived for a while. So, when these incidents happen, I mean, as a Caucasian female or just Caucasian person, period, how do you feel when these things are shown on the news? What are your emotions? What are your thoughts and reactions to them?
I think like everyone else, it's sickening. It's not the country that I want to live in. I am tired of nothing happening afterwards. We know the drill. There'll be the killing, and there'll be talk about this or that should happen, but nothing will happen. I mean, if 20-some first graders can be killed and nothing happens, then nothing's going to happen now. And that's what really makes me angry. And I know dialogue is important, but I think we need to go beyond dialogue and start demanding for for the past few years, I've been trying to listen and learn, and now I'm ready to act more. And I think until we reach that point, it's going to just be more of the same. No other country has this problem. And you can say it's because this man was mentally ill. Well, mentally ill people are in every single country. That doesn't justify it. We need to fix America's gun problem, America's violence problem.
Yes, we do. You're right. I mean, our country has a major problem with this, and other countries are not dealing with these types of discriminatory acts and killings, brutal killings. So I wanted to let's see, is Dr. Graham, you're still on. Do you have any suggestions on some throw out some actions for us? What types of things could we do to Mary Frances is fed up, and she's saying she's tired of just hearing these things, and she dialogues about them, but then she's ready to take action. What kinds of things can we do to take action?
It's a good question. I want to first just say that to my sister Mary Frances, racism actually is a mental disorder. And I think that we just haven't necessarily diagnosed it as such, which is part of the problem, that we don't view it as a mental illness because it's so pervasive that we've normalized it. Two, I just want to say before I get to some action is another part of what happened is that we over-sexualized race in this case because it's easy for people in their common sense thinking to do that with the Asian population. We have sexualized them, hypersexualized them in a more subservient way, even to the point where we do that to women and actually even emasculate their men. So that's there too. And the last thing I'll say before I just make one suggestion about policy is we often think about diasporas in terms of people coming here. No other place has an endpoint for diasporas than America. So there's Asian diasporas here, African diasporas. You name the continent, we have the largest amount of diaspora where people come. And what we don't often talk about, along with European ethnics, Africans, Asians, Latin America, et cetera, is that we don't talk about the diaspora of white supremacy and how that has also followed us wherever we've gone, and how that also plays a role in thinking. Because while this is not necessarily always happening in the ways that we think in other countries, it is happening. And there's a diaspora there that we have to deal with of white supremacy. So with that, I'll say this. One, we are talking about, we have some teeth in civil rights legislation. It basically makes it a federal crime. So we need to prosecute this at the federal level. I think that the locals and others were trying to say it wasn't because they wanted to keep that in-house. The reality is that you need the Department of Justice step in and say that this is a hate crime. It does fall under civil rights legislation, and we should prosecute it as such. So that's one. I think it's on the other side of action too, is that advocates in any movements, whether it be Black Lives Matter, Asian lives, others, have to rally around these situations. There has to be a united front. So this can't just be about Asian people, will march for Asians, and the rest of us march for Black Lives Matter or get engaged in policies that way. We have to actually get really engaged. And I will tell you, I'll give you an example. When this first happened, the day it happened, I tweeted about the need to support the Asian community, but also to put the teeth of the federal government into this case. The first thing someone responds to me is, well, Dr. Graham, there's a lot of the assailants who are African American. And the only reason that he says that, right, is because he figures that I'm African American. And my reply to him was that it really doesn't matter, because I said what I said. I stand on the fact that whoever's doing it, right, that we need to take the long arm of the law to the best of our extent and make sure that we prosecute. And that's what we should be pushing for in this case, federal prosecution.
I agree. Let me hear from our attorney, Attorney Ewan. Allison, you're muted. Ewan, you're muted.
Hi, my
There we go.
apologies.
Okay.
There's an expression in Russian, "Что же делать?" What's to be done? It was a book by Vladimir Lenin, and he had his own answer, which was revolution. And I don't think that's a viable option. Because I don't think people ever understood generally what happens in these situations. It's not just what's going on in one person's head. It's not just what's happening with people around them. It's not just the norms that have been established for however many centuries. How many have had laws written to follow those norms and enforce those norms in more recent decades? It's also circumstances, and it's a way that all these things mix in together. And I don't think that we'll have a one-size-fits-all approach. I think that we can commit to resolving ourselves, not to prejudge people whether they're good or bad, not to see one person as a walking embodiment of society's ills. That's what happens with a lot of these mass murderers, is that they are so focused on some great wrong that they perceive, and the way they try to focus the fix is with a single act of violence or several shootings. And something happens inside the minds of these mass murderers that they think that that's possible. So I think it can be focused on spotting these people who are prone to such violence. That can be one part of it. Then you still have to deal with the rest of the circumstances where not every racist goes out and shoots somebody. There are racists who refuse to hire people, who refuse to rent houses, who refuse to serve as customers. And you know, it's a situation where each potential racist has to have a context and a channel and a set of circumstances where whatever racist tendency they have is enacted on. It's dampened if it has to be. I don't know how you do that. I'm not a social engineer. I don't think that just law is the answer. One of the panelists suggested penalizing hate crimes as a matter of deterrence. One of the things that law does is that it provides an easy identification of what's acceptable and what isn't. So if someone is confused, they have this general sense, well, if it's kind of a bad thing because the law says it is, then you're not supposed to do it. It filters in with the sense that you're not supposed to hate because it can make you serve an extra year in prison or something. So that's one component. I don't think it can really be the focus, because ultimately it's people teaching each other to be good people.
Okay, you make some valid points. I like when you said not every racist kills someone. Before I move on to somebody else, Dr. Graham, do you want to respond to what Attorney Ellison said?
No, not every race
Yeah.
has killed someone, but you have to, make certain acts. And I think that I'm in agreement that certain acts have to be made either illegal or that there's some form of punishment for them. I think the biggest problem with some of this is that some things are done in ways that is very hard to identify them in the legal sense as being racist. You can't necessarily start to lock up people for attitudes, obviously, because then you start to infringe on other freedoms. So I think that a lot of what we're talking about too will have to be handled in some of our more cultural spaces, in education, in other areas, if you're going to really deal with them. I think that's been part of the problem, even when you think about issues like segregation and others. While they were de jure forms and you can kill those forms, it's the de facto types of racism that actually have the most resilience.
Okay, thank you. Thank you everyone so far for your awesome responses and comments and everything. I wanted to ask Stephanie Davis. Stephanie, since Dr. Graham Patrick was just talking about educators and what we can do in the field of education. Since you're a counselor in the school system, what would happen if I don't know, I guess the teachers maybe would identify some people, some of the kids who might be racist, who might say some racist things? How would that be handled in the school system?
Well, speaking from probably a little more limited experience with having to, kind of process that issue with students, we really treat it at my school. We treat it more or less from a bullying or harassment. We come from that kind of that area. So I would have to interview the student who would be considered the victim. And then I would have to interview the perpetrator to get both sides of what's happening. And then if there's an opportunity for the two individuals to sit and have that conversation, like we're talking about having a dialogue now, if the opportunity is there for the students to sit with me or with the principal and have that conversation so that the person who's considered the victim has the opportunity to let the other person know how they felt or how they are feeling. It's an opportunity to educate because we are trying to be more aware in school of what's happening. And I think I've mentioned before on the panel that really we're trying to raise children who are anti-racist. So we have to speak it, we have to recognize it, we can't sugarcoat it. So if something happens, we have to, address it. And I would say if it's something significant, I'm thinking about a situation that I was involved in. The other student, he was suspended. Of course, parents are made aware when a student is suspended. But, like I said, there's opportunities for what we call restorative practices and restorative justice. So we don't want to, sometimes kids say things because they've heard it at home. So we need to make sure that kids understand that what you said, if you called someone, a derogatory name or what you did is not appropriate. So I look at it as a learning experience for both individuals or anyone that's involved in that process. It could even be for the parents. Sometimes we have to educate the parents as well as far as what's appropriate in the school setting.
Okay, thank you, Stephanie. What about Pam? I know that you have done some anti-racism work. What do you have any comments? based on what some of the others have said thus far? Trying to make sure everybody has a chance to talk first and then.
Yeah, one of my comments is that there also needs to be education, like the last comment was about in the schools, education with the teachers and recognizing their own biases, because what one teacher who is aware about what's going on will address and another teacher may not, because they're not really in tune to it, because we have to understand everybody has their biases and what they will act on. I think we a lot of times want to believe that everybody is looking out for the best interests of everyone, when we really do have people who don't care about the best interests of everyone. And so that they have to be checked. There has to be some kind of accountability piece for that person that we're expecting to hold some kind of standard in the classroom or at work or any of those organizations, because they're carrying some biases themselves on what they will address and what they would do. And I think they mentioned something, I think the attorney mentioned that not every racist is killing someone. They're enacting some other things that is almost as harmful as that type of thing, because they are putting barriers in front of people. They are perpetuating stereotypes in some type of way, but in these in a way that you don't see it, but you feel the impact of it. So that education and accountability, I think, is very key, because, like I said, we can't expect that everyone has addressed their biases in helping. You know, we've got a lot of well-meaning people, but sometimes things that they also do push the same message, just in a different way.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Pam. I love how you were talking about accountability. Tangela, let's see if Tangela's still on. Tangela, since, okay, so you're in ministry, you are a chaplain. And so I'm just wondering, you know, as you go about your day, I know you are a hospice chaplain. So when you're in the workplace, what kinds of things do you hear in the workplace that might be interpreted as racist or just off the wall comments? Are you hearing that a lot in your setting?
I wouldn't say that I hear it a lot. I will say that I do encounter it from time to time from patients. And it's just, you know, like sometimes they'll kind of slyly bring up Black Lives Matter or something that they've seen on the news. And in my role as chaplain, I'll be honest, I've struggled with how to address it. If I was a pastor of a church, I feel like that would be a different dynamic if that was my parishioner. But as chaplain, I look at it and I'm like, I technically have, it's considered a power situation. I mean, do I open this conversation? Do I try to do something here? Do I pretend that this never happened? I mean, none of those things sound really good, if I'm being honest. I mean, I have one particular person that I was thinking about, who a couple times when I visited, she would be like, oh, well, I saw such and such on the news and I don't really understand it. And I can't tell if she doesn't really understand, like it's ignorance, she really doesn't understand this topic, or if she's being bluntly racist. And you know, that's, like I said, that's something that I struggle with and how to deal with that in my role. As far as coworkers, I wouldn't say that I hear it. It could be happening, and I'm just not around. But I mostly encounter it from patients and such.
Okay, Tangela, I can definitely relate to what you just said. Out here living in East Tennessee, I hear this all the time from, like you're saying, from patients. And I, like you, I don't really know how to respond. So I listen. And then after a while, I get tired of hearing the rhetoric. And so I just excuse myself. All of a sudden I have to see other patients or, something, I'll excuse myself somehow. I don't really know how to handle it. So if anybody, any other panelists have any ideas for Tangela and myself, we're both chaplains. I'm in a hospital, she's in a hospice facility, or setting. So, we're trained as chaplains, we're trained to listen, but you've heard both of us say we don't know how to respond. And especially me as an African-American person, a Black American, I don't want to get into confrontations. I don't want to try to discredit what people are saying necessarily. Just last night I was at work and I was in a patient's room, and I'm in there to see how the patient is doing. The person is ill, and I'll listen. If the TV's on, a lot of times comments start. So last night, this patient started talking about the China virus, and instead of saying coronavirus or COVID-19, and I just, like I said, I listened, I bit my tongue, but there has to be some kind of response to say to correct this ignorance. So if anybody has any ideas, please tell Tangela and myself.
Well, in my case, I work at a substance use disorder clinic. So I'm a patient navigator, and my job is I'm the first person they see when they come in the door. And people that are functioning with effects of substance use disorders or mental health disorders. So when they come in the door, they're coming in because they're asking for help. So in my immediate situation within the confines of my office building, I do not see implicit bias. It might be there and it might be underlined, but I don't see that as an issue. We went through racial equity training. We've discussed it. We've brought it all out, and I don't see it. Not saying it's not there, but I don't see it. But with the patients, I do agree with the clients, because substance use disorders don't have a race. They don't have a gender. It's not a gender or race. It's not ethnicity. It's not status or origin, geographical locations. People that have substance use disorders or mental illness, they're needing help. So they come in for help. And I've had patients look at me and say, I don't want your assistance. But you walked in the door, I'm sitting at the front for a reason. I'm the patient navigator. So if you're going to get to the back to get help, you got to go through me. And so whenever they start the discussion about my race or my gender and the reason that they don't want assistance, I always redirect. And I said, you're here because what seems to be going on in your life today? Well, I don't want you to help me. What do you need help with? And so I just continually redirect. And 99.9% of the people it works with, and I had one man came in, he had Trump on the front of his shirt and a Confederate flag on the back. And he asked, and I asked him what his name was, and he said, none of your damn business. I said, well, my name is Yolanda. And what is your name? And none of your damn business. My name is Yolanda. And what is your name? And so we kept going through that over and over again till finally he told me his first name. Then we sat there and talked, and he got to his last name. Then we got to why he was there, and we were finally able to get him some help. So the main thing I do is I redirect. I'm not trying. You didn't come to talk about politics. Politics is not the issue. You didn't come to talk about my gender or race or your gender or race. You came to get help. So let's redirect you while you came in the door. So that's what I do.
Thank you, Yolanda. Tangela, I guess, so we both heard that, right? You know, Tangela is dealing with patients as they are dying. And, you know, I'm at a hospital where I might be in a patient's room where the person might have 3 health issues, or, you know, the person might be dealing with stage 4 pancreatic cancer, or, you know, so some of the comments are just bizarre. The fact that their minds go there instead of, you know, talking to myself or Tangela about our, you know, illnesses or fear of dying and things like that. That's what we're trained to deal with. So, okay, thank you everyone for your comments. I still want to hear from, we haven't heard from Vernon. And let's hear from Vernon, and then let's see if Eleazar is still on. Okay, Eleazar may have dropped off, I'm not sure. Vernon, do you have any comments on anything that you've heard so far?
Basically just taking it all in, not really wanting to repeat. I was looking at Dr. Sadler's comment in the chat, and that's actually sort of where I am. How do you penalize these acts, these egregious acts, when it's very apparent that it is about race or gender or some specific, you know, even with the statutes in place. One of the things that's going on here in the metro Atlanta, the authorities right now are not wanting to classify what happened last week as a hate crime, even though last year the Georgia legislature did actually finally in 2020 pass actual hate crime language, actually did pass a statute, and the governor signed it into law. And it doesn't, I don't know what kind of teeth it has, but you know, it's like, you know, are we gonna start doing like we'd had to do in the 60s, where the federal government had to actually come in and prosecute these crimes because the state was reluctant or resistant in terms of actually prosecuting them. You know, it's sort of kind of ridiculous that some of the folks are even the people down here are even saying, well, it wasn't racist. It wasn't. It's like, yeah, it was racist and it was sexist. It was very specific, and sort of knowing the geography and the path that the guy actually took. He actually passed several other establishments that were majority culture establishments en route to the 2 establishments that he attacked in actual Atlanta. He on Cheshire Bridge Road, it's a haven for such adult type entertainment in the metro Atlanta. And he passed several majority culture establishments en route to those specific establishments. So it's like, no, it wasn't. It wasn't by happenstance, or, you know, this, oh, it's a sexual addiction, whatever. Anyway, you know, it's like, miss me with that. But yeah, I'm just wondering how you legally get to the point where you are, where we're seeing justice, where we're seeing someone being punished in proportion for the act that they did, for the act that they willfully did. And, you know, even with the gentleman here, and I don't know if you all remember seeing on the news the sheriff's department in Cherokee County, and the guy that made the captain that made the little off the cuff remark, talking about, oh, he had a bad day. And I don't know if he was just being facetious or if that was his empathy, because they did find out afterwards that that captain specifically had posted some anti-Asian things and was actually selling T-shirts that were with anti-Asian sentiment on his social media. And I don't think they fired him yet, but I know he's in a whole lot of hot water right about now.
Yes.
I have a question about this too, is how do you prosecute this type of crime? And it goes back to what Dr. Graham also mentioned about it being a mental illness, because that's what they will say is why this person did it, was that he had some kind of mental break. So I think it's like, how do you define what this mental break is? What is it? You had a snap of that you didn't like a certain race or gender. So defining it more may be the way of how you tie this to something that can be penalized, I guess. I don't know. We have to need legal to try to help with that, because I know it's all about how you try it in the courts. But what do you call it? What kind of mental illness would you call this?
I'm going to dodge the mental issue, the mental illness part of it, because we don't actually have to go there. What matters when you're prosecuting a crime is what you can prove. One of the things that you have to prove is what's going on with somebody's mind. And if I were prosecuting it and I wanted to prove at least that someone was a racist, not that they necessarily took racism to the next step, but that they were racist. You know, there's what people put on their Facebook pages, the social media. There's how they interact with people. Maybe there are people in retail or bankers or even other lawyers who know how these the suspects interact with other people and on what basis, the sorts of things that they say. Whether there actually is some sort of mindset there that's white supremacy oriented or any kind of racialist kind of thinking. So you just look for proof like that. If you're actually, and then, you know, once you've established this person has all of these thoughts, and maybe that's as far as you can go, then you would ask the jury. Now, ask yourselves, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, if you had a friend who thought all these things about people who weren't his color, and then you find out that given a choice of victims, he chose the people who didn't look like him, would you think that he had some racist hatred going on? You want to use the phrase, ask yourselves X, Y, and Z. And then, you know, you get them thinking. And if you're sympathetic enough and you manage to put enough English on the English, enough body language on the English, on your language, you can convey that to a juror. You know, that actually kind of makes sense. And things go from there. And I dodge the mental illness issue because if you criminal insanity is a kind of defense where if you really are just too crazy to know what's right and wrong, that's how you get off. But racists a lot of times know that you're not supposed to shoot somebody.
You know,
So they're not criminally insane in that respect.
Attorney Allison, and you know, everybody else, you know, I know I've been out of law school a long time. I've been out for 18 years and never practiced, but you know,
no wonder you look so good.
You're funny. You know, I keep thinking about the word intent, and I'm going back to what Vernon said because I think the same way. I've lived in Atlanta 3 times, and well, no matter which city any of us live in, we know that, you know, if somebody commits crimes and they might pass by different establishments to get to specific ones, they had the intent to go to target certain people or certain places. I have to really harp on that, the word intent. So I don't know how this person in Atlanta, you know, that's, I can't justify that. Oh, you know, he had this addiction. He chose whichever places. No, he intentionally chose certain ones, because I know in Atlanta or any other city, these places would be owned by Asians, by, you know, Blacks, whites, some Latinas may own some, you know, so that's not an excuse. Oh, I just chose whichever ones. No, you intentionally chose the ones where there was this group of people, the majority of the people there were of this ethnicity that you didn't like.
You emphasize that it's an inference. Yeah, you can't, the guy doesn't actually confess, I only wanted to shoot Asian women. But you infer it because he had a choice of any number of people who arguably were in the sex industry.
Yeah, I mean, he went to specific addresses, specific spas, so he knew what he was doing. Well, that's my opinion. But if anyone else, if anybody disagrees, speak now.
I just want to be careful that these women too were not in the sexual industry.
Absolutely right. They were not. In fact, that was actually addressed, that there was only one incident involving the police, involving one of these salons, and it was because about stolen keys. You know, as far as the authorities knew, these were legitimately operating businesses. And NPR interviewed the daughter of one of the victims, who was actually the owner of one of these establishments, and she had security cameras all over the place. And even when the owner wasn't actually at the spa, she was checking her security cameras to make sure there wasn't any untoward conduct going on.
Good. So I just wanted to make sure, because we were kind of talking about it as if it was, and I just wanted to make sure that we're not also hypersexualizing them at the same time.
And that's a wonderful thing to do, to remind us how often we slip into what becomes racialized ways of thinking without really going into it. And because no one protests it, it continues to be pervasive in our mindset. It continues to dominate the way that we think. I'm really puzzling, and I'm struggling with this notion about what do we do about these racist acts. And I'm convinced that we have got to change the way that we relate to these kinds of racial violence, whether it be actual physical violence or emotional violence or job discriminatory violence or whatever, voter suppression violence. Voter suppression violence is something that we need to truly lift up. We can see the consequences of what happens with voter suppression violence in places like Georgia. When you remove that violence, you remove those kinds of laws, you see what can happen in a state like that. This is consequential. The way that we think about race is wholly consequential. And until people receive some due consequence for their actions, I think this will continue. It's almost as though we ignore this, as though we accept it as a society, or as though we forgive this, as though they're just a little bit prejudiced. We'll forgive that. No, this is consequential. It's life-changing, life-altering, and life-stealing. And we need to recognize that acts of racialized violence are life-stealing, whether you actually die or whether you take someone's vote, or so there needs to be consequence. This is why Black Lives Matter movement is such a significant movement. It's such a significant movement in part because people are trying to get police officers held accountable for taking people's lives. Until people are held accountable for what takes place, this is going to continue. We need to hold people accountable at a much higher level than we're doing now. And we need to do that not just with laws. I want to see the laws change and the laws made more stringent in this regard, but we in the church have got to do a better job. Black churches, white churches, Latino churches, Asian churches, Indigenous American churches, we need to talk about the value of all human life and lift this up as a significant theological principle. We need to do it in our schools. We need to make sure that we teach our students that every human life is worthy, is precious, and needs to be respected. We need to do this in every sphere of our society. And until we begin to do this, we are not doing the work we need to confront racialist thought in America.
Thank you, Dr. Sadler. It looks like Courtney's has wanted to say something for a while, so let me give Courtney the floor.
Yeah, no, it actually is a great, from what Dr. Sadler said, or Reverend Sadler said, you know, I find myself becoming more and more an abolitionist because we understand that the criminal legal system was built in white supremacy. It was meant to work this way. So while, you know, I like to hear the conversation about accountability and how we might do that, I also get concerned because are we still feeding into that same system, right? You know, I don't want to uphold the white supremacist system by holding these people accountable, but we know that sheriff is in power and that sheriff is part of white supremacy. That jailer is part of white supremacy. That judge that holds the key that picks the jurors is part of white supremacy. So, you know, in my mind, in our immediacy, yes, we need to do this. We need to continue to work in the system that is set, but ultimately, can we break the system down? You know, do we go to restorative justice, to our communities? Do we build beloved community? It just feels, it has felt to me for many years that we have lost beloved community. And that's what I miss. I would like to see more of that building.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you, Courtney. Mary Frances, we haven't heard from you for a while. Do you have any comments? I know you were a part of the Peace Circle with me in Salisbury, North Carolina. So, I mean, that was somewhat like, I mean, it wasn't called a beloved community, but it was a similar concept.
Well, we do have a couple of churches in Salisbury now working with the beloved community and doing good things. But I think Courtney is right. I don't know where to go from here. I truly don't. There are lots of good books, but who's reading them? You know, they're wonderful classes, but who's taking them? Are we preaching to the choir? I think we have to do as Dr. Sandler said, we have to go into the schools. We have to get the churches involved, and we have to. All of those things have to happen. It's an uphill battle, though. It is. It is.
Mm-hmm. I think Dr. Graham has some comments.
Just quickly, I agree with the moral and ethical part of what Dr. Sadler is saying. And I really look at that as part of the internal pressures that we have to instill and develop in people. But you know, to cook something, if I was to use a pot, there's the pressure inside and there's a fire that's on the outside. And so I think that I agree with that. And I also think that we have to focus on changing certain laws, even around the immunity that we provide to law enforcement, to judges. Because what happens in those cases is that basically you are giving white supremacy immunity. And I'll just give you a perfect example. Tomorrow night, you know this, I'm interviewing a gentleman, which I know Dr. Sal and some others are familiar with, Ronnie Long. And what upsets me about Ronnie Long's case, this is a gentleman who did 44 years after being falsely accused and incarcerated. And it turns out that the police actually withheld evidence, DNA evidence that would have showed that not only was the semen and everything else at the scene not his, right? But would have freed him at the age of 19, and he never would have went through this. So 44 years later, he's here. But the real crime is the fact that we have granted immunity. So I said, well, what happens to these police if they're still alive? Or when you think about the exonerated five, which used to be the Central Park Five, I want you to think about this. Yes, they got a civil suit and they get a few $1 million. But no one asked the question, why does not the officers and the DA and others who coerced these untrue, right, confessions not face criminal prosecution? It is because of that immunity. So I think that when we talk about some things we can really focus and tackle in terms of law, that's one of the areas that I think that we have to deal with. So I think it's a matter of that it's all these things, because I do believe you're right on point, Dr. Sadler, Courtney, that we do have to actually touch into a moral compass, an ethical compass inside, but at the same time, we do have to put some fire under the pot and change some of these laws, particularly around immunity. And I'm a personal witness to that, by the way.
Okay, thank you for your comment. Stephanie, you said that you and Courtney were involved with the Ronnie Long movement. Stephanie,
Yes.
yeah. Okay, can you name the name of the organization you're part of, please?
Yes, we are a part of Concord Civil Activists. It's a young group. And I'll tell anybody I'm fortunate to be a part of the group because they actually had an age limit. So I'm Mama Davis in the group. But yeah, being here in Concord and living here for quite a while, I've heard the story of Ronnie Long, you know, but it would come in waves where you would hear about Ronnie Long and then you didn't hear anything. And part of what CCA did was incredible. We were already out protesting anyway, and we just felt like, okay, well, we're out here, but we need to be out here for a reason and out here for a purpose. And so our purpose was to make sure that people knew who Ronnie Long, you know who he is, you know his situation, you know that he was wrongly convicted, and you knew that we were on a mission to make sure that he was released from prison. We traveled to Raleigh and protested right in front of the Governor Cooper's mansion. Like I said, there's nothing like that experience though. I want to make sure that Miss Mary Frances, I feel your energy. And when I tell you that there are times when you feel so discouraged, and we have these dialogues and we think, when is that change going to come? And I have to tell you that I feel like the change, the movement it's here, it's happening. But there has to be action. Like Mary Frances said, I can read a book. I can share what I learned from that book. I can participate on a panel discussion. But without action and without, you know, putting the work in and being committed, there won't be a change. So yeah, I had to share that because, like I said, I never imagined that I would be a part of that movement. And I just feel fortunate that I was there, Courtney was there, our civil activist group was a part of that movement. And when you see for yourself that you can make a difference, you just want to keep going. And so that's part of what Concord Civil Activists, that's what we're doing now. We have some other initiatives and other individuals that we are on a mission for. We're trying to bring awareness to these stories. So I just kind of want to throw that out there. Like I said, it's so powerful to be a part of that group. And and change can happen.
Yes. Yes, yes. So many of you all are doing such awesome work, and just hands-on work. So that's amazing, awesome. Oh, I want to ask a question of Tangela. She is a chaplain, like I've said. She and I are both chaplains, and we are trained to do certain things, to listen, to be empathetic. So, Tangela, what if you were talking to any of us on the panel, or just let's say at work, a coworker came to you, an Asian American, African American, somebody of a different ethnicity, and was just talking to you about some of the things going on in the country. What kinds of empathetic words or reflective thoughts would you say to that person? Just to let them know that you want to be an ally, and just you're there for that person.
I think from my perspective and my experience, like let's say that it was a coworker, like you said, what I would offer them first and foremost is to listen without speaking, without giving any judgment, perspective, or anything, just to listen, but also to validate their experience and what they're sharing. Because I think that part of the problem that we continue to have when we have these discussions is obviously all of us here are on the same page, or we're at least in the same book. But there are lots of people who continue to say that this is not real, and this is not happening, and this is not something that we even need to talk about anymore. To the point that some people who experience it start to feel like, well, maybe I am the crazy one. So that's when I, as the chaplain, can come in and say, no, you're not. This is real. I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're sharing, and I can join them in that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's awesome. That's great. That's great advice. Okay. We haven't heard from Reverend Foster. Yolanda, do you have any comments at this time? We have about 20 minutes, everybody. So I'm trying to make sure everybody has, at least 2 or 3 times to talk. So.
Well, this has actually been a good dialogue, and I do agree with Miss Mary Francis. Dialogue is good, but action is even better. So I appreciate all the panelists for what they've said and the nuggets of knowledge that I've gained. We always can grow. So whenever you feel like you've arrived, you stunt your growth. So we always can grow and obtain knowledge from others. So I appreciate the nuggets of knowledge that I received tonight from others. And I just want to say that the main thing, I feel that we as human beings, not putting any other title, but human beings, should actually show more kindness, more love, more compassion, and reach out to others. And sometimes we got to meet them where they are and be able to stand our ground. And so, and just go out and meet them where they are and stand our ground and be able to definitively express our view without putting on judgment, without putting on airs, without getting angry. Say exactly as we're discussing tonight. You can make your point of view without using hostility, and sometimes that goes a long way.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, unmute yourself again, Yolanda. Reverend Foster, would you tell everybody you're working on your doctorate, and I'm sure everybody would be interested in the actual area that you're working in, because it's related to what we're talking about tonight. So
yes, I'm working on my doctorate. Pray for me. please. And my concentrations are in the area of social justice and community advocacy. And I am a patient navigator at a substance use disorder clinic in Wilson, North Carolina. So I want to actually combine that as far as trying to get a women's shelter, because they do not have a women's shelter in that area, but primarily for women of color because they are underserved. So that's what I'm working on.
Okay, thank you, Reverend Foster. Okay, let me call on, let's see, Vernon, do you have any comments at this time?
Actually, I had a question for Courtney and Stephanie in terms of their county and their area. Because I was looking at Courtney's comment about the DA there still being the same DA that's in place, that's been in place forever. And I don't know what the racial ethnic makeup, the demographics are, but one of the things that did happen in Georgia over this last election cycle, beside us completely flipping blue, I know you all are familiar with the Ahmaud Arbery case down in Brunswick, Georgia. That DA, that woman who allowed all those improprieties, she lost her election to a gentleman that was an independent. So in terms of some of the things that, you know, you all might want to look at in terms of your activity and activism is to, you know, maybe try to find some candidates to run against her or him or whatever, because that's 10 years is like, wow, and they're still doing stuff. And, you know, like everyone mentioned, there's no, you know, what Dr. Graham said, there's no penalty, you know, they're immune from prosecution. And, you know, unfortunately, it seems the only way that we can get rid of some of this foolishness is to vote them out. And if the people in Brunswick could do it, if they could rise up and see finally that, okay, yeah, even though it was 5,000 votes, but Brunswick's a relatively small town and a transient town because they got a federal law enforcement training center there. So their population, as far as the town itself, is relatively small. So, you know, just something to consider, and maybe point your activism, you know, in that direction as well, because we got to get rid of some of these crazy people. It's unfortunate. You know, I'm looking at TV today and I'm listening to Mitch McConnell prattle on, and it's like, really? This is 2020, dude, and you're really sounding like Strom Thurmond or folks from the 60s still. It's like, so we, you know, whatever it takes in terms of voting and voter registration, get them out.
Yeah, so absolutely, absolutely agree. Cabarrus, we are in Cabarrus County, which is just north of Charlotte. So we're about 30 minutes north of Charlotte. It's heavy. Well, it may not be a majority white community any longer. It's changing rapidly, growing rapidly, but it is heavily gerrymandered. And we did manage to flip a few seats in this last election, not enough, but we are still going. And that DA position is one that we are heavily focused on this year. So she's up in 2022 and we are on it as well. So that is our hope. And we are working with Ronnie as well. So it is our hope to get her out for sure.
Okay, thank you, everybody. I need to call on Pam. We haven't talked for a while. Pam, somebody, I can't remember who it was, maybe Stephanie, somebody was just talking about, books that people are reading. Might have been Mary Frances, can't remember, but anyway, so you're a librarian. So who who is actually reading these books that we're talking about? And how can we get a wider, a broader, I guess, wider readership, I guess is how I want to say it. How can we get more people reading books that will help us with our efforts?
Well, there is a couple of things that need to happen. We have to also remember that Black fatigue is real. And so they're either reading or talking to someone Black to try to help them with things. And so that fatigue is really there. And for people to be strong enough, people of color to be strong, there has to be some healing process going on with us as well. We're talking about how to help them. We have to be healed or feel strong enough to take care of some of the actions that need to happen. You know, yeah, we will rally around things and then stuff gets bogged in policies and procedures and we really lose people at that point and we never get to an action, because within those policies, we're talking to people, trying to figure out what they want, what's going on, where the people of color may not be healed or strong enough to say anything. And then then we have people who just don't know what to say and what to do. So it kind of gets lost at that point. So the reading is happening from people who just want to know more, but they get lost into the action piece because they get overwhelmed with reading. And they're like, oh, I can't do anything about this. And they don't really know their power of influence to work. You know, I want you to use your white privilege to help with this. You have an opportunity to do that. And then, so we want them to act more, but we also want the people of color to feel strong enough, because I think there was a message that we're supposed to be so resilient, when there is also a thing we need help as well. There are people who don't want to have conversations because they're tired of this conversation. They don't want to talk. They don't want to help. We want them to learn on their own. But for us to work together more, there has to be some kind of healing that, I think that could work. And I've seen it with where I've seen the resistance of helping the cause because they're just tired of not seeing it get past policies and procedures and not getting to enactment. Where we may see some activities, but we don't see the transformation that we really want to see happen. So there are some books and everybody's writing a book. Everybody's reading a book. Everybody's trying to create something. But right now the reading pieces are happening with those usually people of color reading more, trying to understand their biases. So that's where it is. But I think those conversations about things where people decide to, well, if they can develop how to become comfortable having these tough conversations with each other, we can see some movement.
Thank you. I was, as you were talking, Pam, I was just thinking about the show, The Bachelor. I watched this past season. There was a Black male on. Most people probably know that, but the contestant he chose is a lady. The guy's name is Matt. I don't remember last names, but Matt, and the person he chose to continue his relationship with, Matt James, somebody just typed. Okay, so he chose a lady named Rachel, and then she was, it was found on discovered on social media by whomever that she had attended some antebellum type plantation type, some kind of themed party. I think it was about 2 or 3 years ago. But this was a big deal with some of the Black contestants from the past on the show, with Matt James, who was the current Bachelor, and the host, Chris Harrison, made some comments that were unfavorable to Black people. So anyway, this became a big ordeal. And what I was just thinking about as Pam was talking was how, Matt was telling Rachel when they did the after the rose ceremony, Matt and Rachel had already broken up, but they were having this dialogue, and Matt was saying the same thing that Pam is talking about Black fatigue. We're tired of having to try to explain ourselves to white people or to try to help them with their work on, eliminating racism and just understanding our plight and everything. So, Matt told Rachel this: you have to do your own work as a white person. I can't help you. I don't want to help you. You need to do this yourself. So I was just mentioning that. Again, I thought about that as Pam was talking. So we have about 6 more minutes. Does anybody want to make any closing comments or just things you would like to tell viewers at this point? I mean, anybody, I don't want to call on people. You can just talk randomly, whoever wants to make comments. And viewers, if you would please share this video so that people can hear this dialogue we've just had, and we're about to make closing comments and end in about 6 minutes. But please share, and panelists, please share as well. We want people to hear this. This has been an excellent dialogue tonight. So
just wanted to say thank you for allowing me to be here with you tonight. And I think that this topic, the way that we deal with race in America, is one of the most crucial concerns. Jim Wallace identified this as America's original sin. This is something that we have dealt with for far too long, and it's time that we finally did something about it. We've been promised a conversation about this for 402 years, and yet we still have not had the serious kind of conversation that leads to the systemic change that we need to have. Right now in Charlotte, we're working with a group called RAP Track, Reimagining America Project, Truth, Reconciliation, Atonement Commission Charlotte, and we're trying to really bring the truth and reconciliation process to transforming the way that we think about race in America. I think we need to do this not just in Charlotte, not just in Concord, not just in North Carolina, but across America, and finally deal with this issue that we for far too long put off.
thank you, Dr. Sadler. Anybody else?
Other than the fact that I agree, and I think that at this point in our history, there's probably no time where you've had an equity movement of this volume since civil rights struggles itself. And so this is really an opportunity to not just change minds, but really to change policies, to reshape the law. And I don't think that in our lifetime, as we sit here, some of us may be spanning just over maybe 2 generations here, will have this type of opportunity to do it. So I think that there has to be a real urgency of now to seize this moment. You even have some allies now, even in the private sector. So with that, I would say to move forward with trying to live out our best equity and justice lives as possible. Change as much as you can right now while the getting is good. Because normally there's some backlash that comes after these type of movements over a period of time. So I think that we have this opportunity to move the needle.
Thank you, Dr. Graham. Anyone else?
Yes. I guess in all the wonderful suggestions about the action we can take in the natural, one of the things that sort of remains in my head and which sort of helps me with my fatigue when just dealing with all this, and it's one of my favorite Bible verses, Ephesians 6:12. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts and wickedness in the heavenly places. Then it talks about in verse 13 about putting on the whole armor of God so that you'll be able to withstand the evil. And having done all, stand. And you know, it's a long-term battle. It's deep. It's demonic. You know, for those who are God-fearing folks, it's real. It's and it's rough. It's you know, you get tired, but you got to fight. Because you know, there have been times some of the things I experienced when I was trying to go to law school in Ole Miss. Were it not for going back to that in my head, I probably would have shot somebody, for real. And because I got physically assaulted. And yeah, so, you know, keep the spiritual component, keep the faith, trust the Most High.
Thank you, Vernon. Anyone else? Each of you can say a closing comment or two if you'd like. So I think we've heard from 3 people so far. Anyone else have any closing comments?
One thing that I wanted to say that's it's really just related to being on this panel, honestly. I know that we're here bi-weekly, and it's just now like where I feel like I'm making these connections with people. And I just really feel energized and just very supported. And I leave here knowing that I'm making a difference, and I always feel encouraged after being on the panel. So I just think it's really cool, like Yolanda was saying, working on her doctorate, and you know, just all of us sharing different things and feeling connected. It's just really great to be here, and I appreciate you, Reverend Vicky, for hosting these bi-weekly panel discussions.
Thank you. Thank you. I've enjoyed having you all. Does anybody else have any comments? Then I'll close with a few. Anybody else want to say anything? It's about 10 o'clock.
Now I'll lay me down to sleep. So yeah, I think we can.
Okay. Okay. Okay, so let's see. Going once, twice. Anybody else?
Shalom, y'all.
Okay. Okay, so I just want to say, just go back to what I said in the beginning. I was talking about Sam Cooke's song, A Change is Gonna Come. And so I just want to leave everybody with the question, when is this change going to come? We all can play our part. We all can have conversations. We can have dialogue, and we all need to be taking action to make this country a better place, the world a better place. It's just time for racism to end. It's past time.
Vicky,
The
did you
time
know
is
that?
now.
I was going to say, Vicky, that song is 60 years old.
Yes, and we're still waiting for that change.
Yeah.
Mary Frances, that's what's so sad. It's disheartening. So again, when is change going to come? We can all do our part. Please share this video on your pages so that other people can hear what we've all had to say. If there have been questions posted in the comment sections, we will see them and try to address them. This is to our viewers. Thank you all panelists for joining me tonight. We've had several panelists on tonight. Thank you viewers for watching. And again, when is change going to come? Play your part, and we can do things together. The panelists tonight, we've had several on, all but 2, I believe, have been located in North Carolina. Sometimes we have people from all over the country, but most of you all, our panelists, are in North Carolina. So yes, I hope that some partnerships come about and you all help each other with various projects and in various groups and everything. That would be awesome. Collective efforts matter. Thank you all for joining tonight. Thank you, panelists. Good night.